We have on the line with us Ken Gichinga.
Gichinga.
Yeah. Karibuni mte Gichinga. Ken Gichinga, who's an economist. And we just want to connect with him, of course, have a look at the economic impact of these protests, what they have done. And this is in no way any way to reduce the lives lost, and we will still talk about those in the coming hours and to figure out the what next, the justice, because 11 is too many. 11 is likely not the actual number. It's likely higher than that. But the front page of the Business Daily also talks about 18 billion shillings that has been lost basically as daily GDP for 17 counties that were hit by these protests. But let's connect with Ken now. Good morning.
Good morning, Tim.
Very nice to hear from you. Just as, you know, a Kenyan, where were you yesterday? How did you spend the day? Any disruptions to your life, or were things going on? Were you in a county where it was business as usual?
Indeed, I had to work from home, but as an economist, I had to monitor all that was happening. And of course, sincere condolences to the lives that were lost, but also the business costs were significant. Lots of cancellations, lots of in postponements, and obviously the business costs will be as significant as the human costs.
Thank you for speaking to that, Ken. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that. Reflect on those costs for us. Break it down in simple terms. What scale of loss are we looking at?
Well, I think first of all, I have to notify you that there is a significant population that depends on a living wage, on a daily wage. So they wake up in the morning, go to their business districts, and whatever they're able to get is what they'll be able to buy to put food on the table. That's a huge part of the population. So the fact that there was no business of activity meant that a lot of people did not get that daily wage, and many people possibly had to sleep hungry. But on a grander scale, it means people had to invest more in security. Remember, on Sunday, on streets such as Mamangina, it was filled with welders putting in metallic barriers, people spending 300,000, 250,000. This is money that could have gone into other areas, into paying salaries, into expanding. So really, there's a chain effect that would be felt from yesterday's events.
You know, Ken, if you just look at those that you've talked about, just those sectors, many of them are the small MSME, micro and small sector, very, very informal. How would anyone, even government, be able to tell the direct impact of such closures, such Maandamanos on such businesses? Like, you know, even you as an economist, you look at macro, you look at the bigger number. But you see, at the bottom of this is a woman in Mali, and we're going to be having that bite now. A woman in Mali and somebody and other local traders were saying, we operate along the highway, we sell onions and tomatoes and pawpaws, and for an entire day, we did not open, and we've lost. How are you able to quantify to a personal level?
Yes, Eric, the biggest challenge we have in developing countries such as Kenya is a big segment of the economy is in the informal space. Almost 80% really of people in our labor force are in the informal space. And it's very difficult for the bureaus of statistics to be able to capture that segment. But we do have proxies that give us a good indication of how bad things were. And there are a number of proxies. I think one of the things that I've always highlighted is the savings rate for many MSMEs is quite low. So the fact they have available cash reserves to be able to rebuild is quite a challenge. So many of them today will be going to apply for maybe a micro loan. And the interest rates we have on those micro loans are very, very expensive. That's another challenge we have in Kenya. So it's really, many of them are caught between a rock and a hard place. Many of them will reach out to family, to friends, maybe to the circles, but the way you'll see it from a macro level, it will appear in things such as non-performing loans. You'll start seeing non-performing loans, which already right now are at the highest we've seen since they started collecting records at 17.6%. Those are some of the proxies that give us an indicator of the large-scale effect.
Mm-hmm. I worry about the impact on small business owners. Like you've said, a lot of them, the ability to rebuild, to even have a savings cushion is quite intense. I also think about insurance and insurers. For those businesses that have the privilege of being insured, even for personal investments. What does the economic impact of these demos look like on the insurance industry? Are we seeing more claims, of course? Are they being paid out? Is the cost of premiums rising as a result? Are more people taking up insurance? All of that.
That topic has always been a controversial issue when it comes to issues of demonstrations or natural disasters, what they call acts of God. Those ones tend to be very, very dicey, and it will really depend on the insurance house. Some houses have become a bit more innovative and have sort of premiums for that, but many of them would say part of this was just thuggery, some of this was people take advantage. So it's a very slippery slope. But I'd also like to remind you that our penetration levels for insurance sector are quite low. It's about almost 3-4%. So we aren't talking about an awful lot of people who have that latitude. What most people will do is they'll probably reach out to a family member, a friend. Sometimes these dukas also have unions amongst themselves where they're able to save together. Those tend to be the most immediate lifelines. But the challenge in a situation like this is not one shop coming down and that can be rescued. This is almost a whole street. So the extent to which others can come in to help is also quite questionable.
Yeah, I think you almost wonder if it makes a case for protest insurance or emergency recovery funds for businesses, if this is going to be something frequent. You can respond to that in just a moment, Ken. But first, let's also hear from the traders firsthand that were affected. We'll run the clips and just listen to their own challenges on how they're trying to reconcile losing out on a business day. Let's have a listen.
Kuna vijana wako hapo wako na mishale. So hiyo hali ya kupita wakakuwa wanakimbisha vijana, nikakuwa kama nataka kutoroka. Hiyo mshale ikakuja ikapiga mahali fulani so that ikanipiga hapa kwa mguu.
Sasa mkianza kuleta maguns, waanza kupiga watu mishare. Surely, as readers, wanaweza tufanye nini?
Hao ni goons ambao wameletwa na watu wenye hatujui, but tunaomba serikali ifuatilie maneno ya goons kuingilia maandamano ya Gen Z.
Okay, we'll continue to just share reflections, even from different parts of the country. I think we had a trader from Kisumu who was also speaking to her frustrations.
From Makueni, I think
and
we
Makueni
had
as well.
A couple of traders from Makueni who also spoke in a story that was aired on NTV last night.
Right.
And what happened in Makueni, there was a torching of a matatu. This is, I think, along water, and then in the Mali there was a disruption of business. And there's this one woman who was speaking so spiritedly about it and emotionally about, the kind of losses.
Yeah.
It's a whole day and nothing earned.
I was thinking about what Ken has just said, and I'd love him to speak to it as well. That thing of insurance penetration is very low. Mostly you go to a family member, a friend, you say, I need to rebuild, I need to restock, I need to repair, I need this much. And then we also know what % of our population is formally employed. It's also not that big, if we're being honest. So you're either relying on a person who's formally employed or who is also a fellow business owner like you, right, by and large. And again, not a large business owner. Mostly, making things meet day to day. What kind of economic repercussions does that have for us right now and long term? Because it's kind of this, I'm trying to keep afloat here, so I'm asking Eric. But then I can't pay Eric, so I ask Jano. And then I give to Eric. and then I ask Eric again, I give to Jano, and then I find myself with a Shylock. It becomes a really, really terrible credit cycle, which can be very unhealthy. But then also, what economic impact does it have when all of us are just basically trying to make an economy work within us, and we're not so much going to banks and insurance to help prop us up.
And within the unpredictability. But I think that's valid. Maybe Ken can speak to it. I know we still have him on the line. Ken, if you heard Mariam's remarks shortly, if you can speak to that, and then later on, to Eric's point, listening to the traders from different parts of the country. But yeah, Ken, you heard that last question from Mariam. If you can just speak to that.
Absolutely, that's quite profound. And normally it would not be so difficult sometimes for the traders to be able to get support from friends and business partners. But I think if you take a step back and ask yourself, over the last 3 months, how many 4-day work weeks have we had? These are weeks that either had a holiday or a protest. If you count the number of work weeks, 4-day work weeks, there have been very, very many, probably the highest we've seen. So it speaks to a general economic situation that's quite low. I know the Bureau of Statistics came up with the Q1 numbers. GDP grew at 4.9%. But really, and as I said, that's really the segment that's been in the formal sector. In the informal space, it would possibly be much smaller. So it calls for a bit of dynamism, and thankfully Kenyans have an entrepreneurial spirit. They are dynamic, they are resilient, but there's also a limit to how much resilience one can ask from our traders.
I also, there's only so much. I also wanted to ask, in an ideal world, is there any role that government can play in cushioning businesses after unrest in an ideal world? Any examples you can speak to, or anything that should be in place to cushion businesses from the government's perspective?
I mean, there are many strategies. Counties tend to be closer to the traders. So the county governments sometimes in other countries could come up with a small stimulus rebuilding package that could come up, because these are the people who end up paying the license fees at the end of the day. That's one area. But also many of these businesses belong to SACCOs. So to the extent that they can receive special low interest rate, because the challenge we have in Kenya is our interest rates are very high. So yes, you'll be able to secure a line of credit, but if it's a Shylock, you'll end up paying very, very high, even if it's a normal commercial bank. So I think, again, SACCOs could also be innovative in that area.
I think this may now call for a deeper conversation, because I can see such a conversation happening where, for example, the government has imposed a curfew on Nairobi, like happened during the COVID years, where the government has imposed a curfew because of this public health emergency. And so they're saying, shut down your business. And then now the government is saying, okay, so how can we then cushion some businesses coming in, and so on and so forth globally? Or even if in the case of security issues, and then you impose a curfew and say, shut down business, then the government could come in. But in this particular case where it's unrest, where do you begin, where do you end? It's unrest, it's in pockets, it's not even universal. Even if you talk about Nairobi, it's not on all parts of Nairobi. But then there are businesses that closed in other parts of Nairobi that did not face unrest for fear of any unrest getting to them. So if we talk about now the government, for example, saying, let's support. Where do you begin? Where would you end? And you don't even know, are we going to have another kind of unrest next week? Are you going to have another one another day? To what extent would you have? So it's I don't know, it's a dicey situation. But maybe we can look at what happened 2007, 2008. There was widespread political unrest in this country. Many businesses lost, many people lost their businesses and their incomes. Was there anything at all that was done to support businesses?
That was quite a particularly difficult time in the history of this country. And you remember that was just 7 months after M-Pesa was launched in March of 2007. So mobile money wasn't as extensive. I think the saving grace we have today is we have mobile money that can be able to connect people not just to friends and family here, but also diaspora. We have a huge diaspora component here who tend to support their local business people, and those money transfers, even with the new Trump taxes, are still able to get diaspora support from their colleagues. So at that time, we did not have deep mobile money penetration, so it was extremely difficult. There are some businesses that went down then that have never really recovered. Thankfully, it was 1 month, and actually the year that followed, there was a remarkable stability. It was the fastest growing year, now 2009, and those are commitments that really we shall never see that again. So also political commitment to say that will never ever happen again in Kenya. That in itself can inspire confidence and allow people to invest what they call building back better.
That's a really good point. The confidence,
Yeah.
because I know one of the questions we'll ask is about that. Ken, please stay with us. We still want to engage you a little bit more, but we have Eric from Bungama on the line. Eric, good morning. Do you have any question or comment you'd like to make today?
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Yes.
Yes. Please turn down the TV or radio in your house just so that you can engage us better. Yeah. And
Okay.
Right. How are you doing, Eric? And what would you like to ask or share today?
I am very good. And good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes. I just wanted to say, our country is going in a bad situation because if we follow Honorable Raila Odinga, what he said yesterday, I think our youths can come back to their senses. Because we have seen the goons everywhere. Every person is running up and down. There is no business going on. There is no work. We are going nowhere with our country because what Sabasaba wanted, it is not what we are doing. Mm-hmm. Because what they were looking for multi-party system, and they wanted freedom in our country. Mm-hmm. But what we have gone up to now, I think we have lost everything. We have come to demos, beating up others, looting. So our country is not going in a good direction. Mm-hmm. I would like to ask my fellow colleagues, we come back to our senses. Mm-hmm. We see Kenya is ours. Kenya is our good country. Mm-hmm. We are losing trust even to the investors. Mm-hmm. We are losing direction. Let the country come back so that we can work and even pay our, because we have much to do for our country to be like other countries in a peaceful way.
Right. Eric.
So that our children can also go to school well.
True. Eric, just a quick question, because in the 1990s, Sabasaba was fighting for multi-party democracy. When you think of today, what's happening, what would be that change that you would want to see, similar to what people were agitating for in 1990? Then it was multi-party democracy. Now, what change would you want to see?
What I want to see in Kenya is a peaceful, good country, good governance. Like we have a new constitution. When we go for demonstration, let us carry the flags up. Let us not fight, because that is not what we wanted to happen in Kenya.
All right. Thank you so much.
We are in a good country.
We are. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much, Eric. We're getting back now to our conversation with Ken, but I absolutely see where Eric is coming from. He says what we were pushing for, yes, we got there. What's happening now is not a clamor for change, right? It's something that has been co-opted, it's something that has been weaponized, it's not anything anything good. But he's saying we have a country to fight for. We want good governance. We want to be able to protest peacefully if you're coming out, right? You carry your flag and you hold it high.
So how do we push for that? But we'll take a break and figure out the new clamor, because I think it's polarizing, right? It's now becoming a bit polarizing how people are pushing for change.
Yes.
It's coming up to 7:30. We'll still have a conversation on the impact on our economy. Sample more of your feedback. Thank you for those who are already beginning to call in. Fixing the Nation, one conversation at a time. We're back in just a few minutes.
858.
Ken was nodding when you were saying that. He's like, yes, yes, yes. We'll come back to him in just a bit. Copy, paste.
Insert AI face. And Gichinga. Let's go.
Rewind. This clip will be on YouTube later. Just go back to what Mariam said, Andika, and then do it. Ken will come to... I know, wink, wink. We'll come to Ken in just a moment. We're still continuing the conversation of the economic impact. Another Eric today, Pierre. I was going to say, when Mariam said Eric did a good job, I'm like, tusisahau Eric wetu. Acha unafanya kazi for Eric.
Siko hapo baile. Sinanga yo shida.
Just to move along. But yeah, just some feedback coming in. I think a lot of people are starting to have the conversation of what happens next. Let's have general talk that everyone can benefit, not only criticizing or siding with government all the time. That's Jeffrey Omondi. How is town currently? That's Lloyd still speaking to, trying to figure out if there's movement, if it's okay. Ruto is not a profile in courage. Where is he when the country is burning down? That's Mama J. But she also later on says, the caller is right. Kenya is looking pretty ghetto right now, and it's not good for investors. So I think now it's moved from peaceful protest co-opted by rioters to just sort of a sense of, do we need to go the protest way? And I think it's an important conversation to have, because I think there was some movement in the right direction, which unfortunately has now turned into everything. But we'll speak about that a little bit later. I wanted to ask you something, Ken. I wanted to ask if there's any reliable data of how long local economies could usually take to recover, especially when there's disruption and riots. If you have any data, whether it's Kenya-based or other countries that are facing what we're going through now, a lot of unpredictability, a lot of uncertainty, how long roughly would it take for the local economy to recover?
Oh, it really varies from sector to sector, whether you're talking about fast food shop, whether you're talking about a tailor. I mean, it really depends with the frequency of the traders. If you find a fast food shop where people are coming in today, Tuesday, it's daily cash flow, then definitely that can rebuild faster. Small businesses thrive on cash flow. So how soon can their customers come back? But if it's something that is fairly, maybe a bit more seasonal, maybe like events, you just lost a client yesterday, your next client will be next month, that definitely will be much larger. And Janet, here, I think we've been talking a lot about the daytime economy, but there was a lot that happens in the nighttime economy. And you remember last night there were events in Gong that were extremely scary. People are not able to get to their homes, and the nighttime economies were also significantly disrupted. So it really depends on the sector, the frequency of the customer patronage and such.
Interesting perspective.
Lots. Oh, sorry, Eric.
No, I'm also just reflecting on what Ken is saying and looking back and asking myself, so if I just move this conversation into why is there so much agitation in the country at present, and I want to throw that question to the economist, Ken Gichinga. Many people say it's the economic situation that is leading people to have this kind of, unrest, even in their homes and in their lives. Is it true? And does the data correlate with this? The data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, what is it telling us about the economy and the performance of the economy? And is that what is happening on the ground? Is there a difference?
That's a very powerful question, Eric. I would say Kenya's history if you go back the last 100 years, moves in 30-year cycles. You remember when the British came to Kenya in the late 1800s, the 1890s, they started building the railway from Mombasa to Kisumu. And it took about 30 years before the first African resistance to land occupation. This was in the 1930s. This was the period of Harry Thuku, who was detained in the same central police station as Albert Ojwang in the 1930s. At that time, it was about land ownership. It took another 30 years and takes us to the 1960s when we get independence. And this was the independence luminaries, the Jomo Kenyattas, the Jaramogi Oginga Odingas. For them, it was about Africans taking control of government, and for that generation. Then you add another 30 years, it takes us to the 1990s. This is a generation of Raila Odinga, Martha Karua, all those luminaries who are fighting for multi-party politics, and that was the cause of their generation. And if you add another 30 years, it brings us to now. And really the cause of this generation, it's not really about land ownership, it's not about independence, it's not about pluralism, it's really about the economy. Young people are graduating from universities, top degrees in actuarial science, computer science, and they can't get any jobs. They have to stay at home. Sometimes they have to get jobs that are way below what they studied. So the cause of these, really the sole purpose of this generation is really about the economic part of Kenya. We have media freedoms, we have political party freedoms, but people are not able to put food on the table. So the issues we have at this time has to be about the economy, the state of the economy. How do we reduce our unemployment, which is possibly approaching about 40%, and which has human costs because people have to postpone so many things about their lives because of the economy. So it's really about reading the moment and really being able to come up to speak to economic solutions.
Right.
But then is that possible to have a quick fix to that? Because if you look at the conversation that's been happening in the last, even stretch it back to 10 years, it's been about the same. It's about, propping the economy so the economy is able to serve this young population. We call it the demographic dividend. In this particular case, the company is not declaring a dividend for like the 20th consecutive year. Is it possible to get a fix quickly to this, to the economic situation that we are in?
There are definitely short-term solutions, medium-term solutions, and long-term solutions. I think, first of all, we need to really bring our interest rates down. I think one of the things that Kibaki quickly discovered was high interest rates crowd out the private sector. So to the extent that you can bring interest rates on government securities down, it means banks can now focus on lending to you, to me, to Janet, to Mariam. And that was the case that when Kibaki came into power, that banks would visit you in your offices and tell you about their new products. Now, Eric, when was the last time a bank visited you to tell you about the new products they had?
They'll say it on social media.
They just keep telling me about that.
Yeah, we have a caller.
Because they get money from bonds and infrastructure bonds and not lending to entrepreneurs. So I think it's really bringing those interest rates down, which means government has to reduce its borrowing for those interest rates to come down. So there are definitely some short-term solutions, and there are also some long-term solutions.
Right.
Hold the thought, Ken. We just want to get a caller from Kisumu, Michael. Kiambu, okay, pole. Let's hear from, of course, from Michael. Question or comment, Michael? Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. About fixing the nation this morning. I'm calling from Kiambu. I'm a director of Central Kenya Development Network. Yeah, and we deal with community groups and their businesses. What my comment is the issue of micro enterprises, small and medium enterprises, where the youth, the young people can grow their economy, is so it's deteriorating.
True.
Lack of access to credit. Then you have the poor governance system leading to these demonstrations and frustrations. Kiambu is one county where we have macroeconomic sectors and also micro enterprises, whereby the young people we do their businesses from morning to around midnight. So when we have a situation whereby they are not able to save, they are not able to run their businesses properly, they are riots, they are all this, the loss is so much. And given that our population is young, whatever policies we are having at the top are not helping the young people. We need to go back to the drawing board and see how we revitalize the microeconomic sector, the small and medium enterprises. Not just talking about Mama Boga and wheelbarrows and all that. I think we are losing a certain conversation in our development. Thank you.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, because we do often think of some companies, when they're big enough, they will get, they'll get bailouts. They have, of course, access to financing quite easily. And then when you're very small as well, when you're the Mamamboga, again, you have access to short-term credit a lot of the times, or it's easier to finance your day-to-day operations. Then when you're in the middle, you're kind of left in limbo. I don't know if Ken can speak to that, but that's a really great insight, Michael. Ken, do you feel the same is true?
It's very true, but I would say I think the one saving grace, as I said earlier on, is that Kenya has possibly over any other country in the world, is we have a deep mobile money penetration. And that, for me, I don't think we use it enough as a stimulus measure. You remember in the United States, during the COVID pandemic, the government was sending checks to individual households and businesses. And that's a first world country. Now, imagine how much more with our mobile money penetration. If we said, we have details from Mama Mboga to the bus owner, we have all their credit details. We can be able to push a small stimulus package through their mobile phones. That would possibly be the first time in the world where a stimulus package is pushed through mobile money. And that's something that Kenya can to do. So I think there's also space for innovation. I think innovation, back to Eric's question on what can we do to fix the economy, I think we are not utilizing all the innovative tools at our disposal to be able to lift people out of poverty.
Right. I like this analogy of the frog in a boiling pot. I remember it so often whenever I think of Kenya, Ken. And I think of the kind of economic situation we've been in during Uhuru's tenure, and it was the frog is in the pot, but the heat is being increased, kidogo to incrementally, a little bit. So the frog's body kind of acclimatizes to the heat by the time it notices that things are kind of hot. And then over the last 2 years, it's just someone just took the knob to the max, and now the water is boiling. It's proper boiling. What are some of those indicators of that big shift in the economy? Some of those macro and micro indicators that you've seen yourself over the last 2 years, and especially from a business perspective and personal perspective as well, personal finance perspective.
That's a really profound observation, Mariam. I started providing commentary back in 2015, 2016. This was a time that some banks had started really coming down. And at that time, economic analysis was considered very niche, very esoteric. It was only for economists. Right. But over time, as obviously our debt levels have gone up, access to credit has become harder, it has really become a mainstream situation. It shocks me today how an ordinary Uber driver or a Mamamboga is able to tell you about our debt situation, is able to tell you about our cash flow situation. So it tells me that a topic that was once very, very niche now has become mainstream. Even things such as finance bill that people didn't even know about. Budget days used to pass as if nothing happened, but now they have become the center of protests. So for me, it shows how this is a topic that has been cooking, and I like your analogy. Now we're at a boiling hot solution, and now the way forward has to be really about solutions. We really have to move into solutions, and really all the political actors have to be really now coming up with economic solutions, because the reason young people on the streets today is many of them really are unemployed.
A quick question, Ken. I know we're coming to the top of the hour. Now that you mentioned solutions, I'm just wondering whether one such could be, whether this unrest could force policy shift. You know, the worst thing about that is you hear tax, borrowing, or budget reallocation. Do you think this calls for some kind of policy shift? Is it something you, as Ken, given the chance, like these are my recommendations, we need to have this policy shift to be able to cushion businesses in future? What would that look like?
I think we have to start with our fiscal policy and look at our growing borrowing, our budget deficit. That budget deficit keeps expanding, which means government is borrowing more and more. I always said, if we can reduce that budget deficit by 25% each year, it means government every year is borrowing 25% less. In a few years, we'll hit a surplus. And the moment government reduces its borrowing, it means now the private banks can be able now to focus on you and I and businesses, and they can really start focusing on where they should always have been focusing on from the beginning, lending to businesses. Once businesses get credit, they'll start expanding, they'll start hiring more people. If you're a restaurant, you'll be able to afford more cooks, more waiters, because you have more clients, and you start now hiring more people. And that ripple effect of money circulating in the economy means other sectors such as agriculture, SME, trade. So I think it really begins with a commitment to our public debt and starting to say, this is the year where we start having smaller budget deficits, and the ripple effect will be felt down the chain.
Okay.
We have a caller also calling in from Taita Taveta. Festus is on the line. Festus, good morning.
Morning, sir. How are you?
Very well, thank you, and thank you for calling in. You have a question or comment to the conversation that we're having now with Ken Gichinga?
I just want to comment something about our leadership in our country.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Actually, I'll put it in Swahili. Hello?
Yes.
Tuendelee.
Ukweli umebaki kwamba Kenya hii hatuna upinzani, na hii ndio inaleta shida.
Hatuna nini?
Hatuna upinzani.
Upinzani.
Yeah. Kwa sababu kazi ya upinzani ni kukosoa serikali. Na wakati tumewachia vijana wakosoe na waseme hawako leaderless na wako groupless na majina kama hayo, ni kuonyesha wamefika mahali hawawezi kuwa haki zao hazitetewa. So mimi nilikuwa naomba kwa niaba ya nchi yetu ya Kenya, na kwa vile napenda Kenya yetu, Raila kama hawezi ndani atoke kabisa. Kwa sababu ikiendelea namna hiyo, hatuwezi kuwa na saa ile kuna shida ndio tunaona nini upinzani. Saa ile nchi imenyamaza, hakuna upinzani. Ndio unaona vitu mingi inafanyika kitu watu wakitumia kifua. Kwa sababu wewe sema vijana wana shida. What is wrong with calling them meeting in your study? So inaitwa. Na watu waongee na wao na wasikilize. Mimi nimekuwa kwamba kila kitu tunaonekana wa Kenya. Hata juzi nilikuwa Tanzania, unasikia mtu anasema wameleta maandamano. Kila mahali tunaitwa watu wa maandamano. Hatuwezi keti na hawa vijana. Ukweli kama ungejua vile uchungu ulioko wa kulea mtoto, hata Raila angeongea jana, because hata pale alikuwa anaenda kurisk. Afadhali vile alienda Serena, nafikiri they were eating something at Serena.
Asante Festus. Nikuulize Festus.
Niulize.
Jana hapo kwenu Taita Taveta, uko pande gani ya Taita Taveta?
Niko area very remote, lakini mimi nimekulia Nairobi. Niko Kisumu. Mahali kuna madini, mahali saa yote kuna migomo.
Huko jana kulikuwaje? Kulikuwa na maandamano?
Unajua sisi tunapenda amani, so an extent that tumekubali tusimiliwe. Kwa sababu sisi ni wachache. Hata ukiangalia vile magao inagawanywa Kenya, sisi ni kama huwa hatupati chochote. Ya unaweza ufikia ile uchungu mimi nasikia, kwa sababu ni haki yetu kupatiwa hata kama sisi ni wachache. Tuwe tumegawanywa kitu. Angalia masies ni wangapi wataita. Na sisi tunanyamaza. Sasa tunaendelea kunyamaza namna hii mpaka sasa tumefika kiwango ingine. Hata mimi nilikuwa nataka nifanye maandamano, lakini nilikuwa mbali, niliandamana na mbuzi.
Mbuzi. Asante Festus.
Asante Festus.
Lakini kuna uchungu kabisa.
Ni kweli.
Wakati tunachagua viongozi wanawasha hiyo kazi, wanaenda wanashirikiana mahali watoto wetu wanaendelea.
Asante Festus. Asante sana kwa kutupigia simu.
Ni kweli. And ni kweli, if we don't deal with that underlying pain and the underlying issues, there's nowhere we're going.
Yeah, I think before we release, Ken, just something that Festus has said is maybe is for us to understand what Maandamano looks like and means for people across the country. For some, it could be protesting in the streets. For others, it could be something different.
Yeah.
Because people are not happy with things, as they, I think a majority of Kenyans. Ken has spoken to the economic situation. Many are shying away from protests and demonstrations. Okay, what does agitation for change look like from your perspective? And maybe that's something that we could go into. But just before we let Ken go, anything else that we want to stir from him?
What does economic dissent look like, or economic aggression, or you know what I mean? Economic protesting. What does that look like? I feel like because we're already at such a terrible point as far as our finances, personal and country, are concerned, it becomes then very hard to even agitate for things using the power of money. So then it's like, okay, how do you then weaponize that? How do you use that? I'm just trying to think out loud. Yes, because a lot of the reasons that people go to the streets is because their pockets are not lined. So is there a way to then reverse that? I'm just trying to think out loud. Ken, help.
Well, I think what we saw last year with the finance bill, I think that was a very effective way, where it was one issue, the whole country was centered on one issue. Because when you talk about the economy, there are so many things about the economy. You could talk about how banks are charging interest rates. But remember last year, it was very specific on the finance bill. And I think that clarity of thought is possibly what made it very effective. And I think this year's cycle, again, it starts in September, following it day by day, month on month, because a lot of the decisions in next year's finance bill will be made in September, in October. So I think it's being very alive to the fact that this is not just something that happens in June, July, but really is a daily conversation, and you have to monitor all the daily indicators to be able to give input at that time.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Ken Gichinga, thank you very much for speaking to us. Ken is an economist and he's been speaking to us from the comfort and the safety of his home this morning. or is it office? But well, wherever he is, it's safe. And thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. In the next hour, we want to find out what's happened overnight across various parts of the country. We'll be linking up with some of our reporters, like in Muranga, what has happened overnight. We know that there was a lot going on in Muranga yesterday. We'll be seeking to understand what happened, and also then posing the question, so what do we do next? All right. So I'm seeing very many comments coming in, and people are saying, guys, can we now talk? Even a caller from Tetraveta is saying, all right, so do we, even Eric saying, do we talk? Is it time for dialogue? Let's ask ourselves that question. And what form, shape, or what should it look like, if at all? Keep it here for that, coming up to 8 a.m. Good morning.